Over 2,800 people have made it into the Two Comma Club by making at least $1 million in their business. And you get the opportunity to understand exactly how it is that they have done it on an individual by individual basis through this podcast. If you're interested in learning more about the tidbits and advice that they have, then you should consider subscribing to the Two Comma Club newsletter, where you'll get daily updates and advice on the podcast and the things that we are learning from the individuals who have made at least $1 million. Just go to 2ccnewsletter.com or click the link in the description down below and subscribe. Welcome back to the Two Comma Club podcast. Today, Chris and I are joined by Eric Thayne. I got to read his amazing book, Create, Don't Capture. So if you guys have not checked this book out yet, you need to check it out, and we can drop the link in the description down below. But Eric, if you wouldn't mind, kind of let everybody know who you are and what you're up to and how it is that you got to the Two Comma Club, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll do that. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. I appreciate you having me here and giving me the opportunity to share this message with people. Um, yeah, so well, that's a big question. That's a long story. So I'm Eric. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm an online coach, content creator, creative type. I've always been that type of since a young age. Like always was into creativity and art and music and design and video and all these kind of things. But then also had this like really deep entrepreneurial side to me that was just very like just from a very young age thinking about like how does the world work and how does commerce work and how do people make money and how they do this, and like trying to figure that out and trying to understand businesses and growth and like my life and things like that. And so I would say that if I were to describe myself to somebody, it's just I feel like I'm the combination of just those two things. It's just like creativity and entrepreneurship, and then creativity in entrepreneurship, and then entrepreneurship in creativity, right? And so yeah, I help people do that. Basically, I help people grow businesses online, to create content, to grow their audience, to be innovative, to be creative, to build the life they want, to build their purpose, their mission, to make things happen, to make money, and we just do it with a lot of fun and do it in a purposeful way. So that's me.
I love it. If you don't mind sharing a little bit, because you approach things a little differently. I think a lot of people are like, hey, what do I have to do today? How do I create a video? What do I do? You come about a little different approach, which I like. I think it's more organic in my mind. But if you want to describe that and kind of what that looks like for folks and what you do different kind of makes you stand out.
Yeah, as far as like how to create
Yeah,
content,
yeah.
I mean, there's a lot to it. And I think that I would say that my approach to content creation is, if I were to define it with two things, I would say one is on the side of really making it meaningful. Okay. So that's something that I care deeply about. I always talk about how like most marketers see content just as like another marketing channel for their business, for their offer, for whatever they do. And it's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Like in a way it is, right? And so you have to understand that. But when you really start to think of yourself not just as like I'm just going to make content just to promote my offer, which ultimately ends up making it kind of fall flat. And in today's day and age, like people can see right through that, and it's not engaging. Like people don't want to follow it. On the flip side of that, if you really start to see yourself as a creator, see yourself as somebody who creates content, not because like I need to do this marketing activity for my business, but because we live in a day and age where if you want to be building something, if you want to be doing anything, if you're the type of person that's entrepreneurial or that wants to grow or that has a vision, has a goal, has a dream, you've got to be creating content. You've got to become a creator. Like it's who you are, and honestly is it's who we have to be first and foremost, is somebody who's putting content out there. Now when I talk about content, right now that might mean TikToks and reels and shorts and YouTube videos and tweets and stuff like that. Down the road that may not be the case. Maybe it's holographic things, or virtual reality, or we're communicating telepathically through Neuralink or something like that. Like content has evolved over time, but it's always been a thing. If you have a mission in the world, if you have something you're trying to build, something you're trying to grow, you've got to be able to get the message out there. And the way that you do that is through content, whether that's an ad in a newspaper, on a billboard, or a radio ad, or it's a TikTok or a reel, it's content. And so, when I think about it that way, is like as a personal brand, as a person who wants to do things in the world, like I have a deep desire to do that. And there's a lot of people, listening to this podcast who are the same way, right? That you want to build, you want to create, you want to do things in the world. Nothing's going to be more advantageous to you in the long term than consistently creating content, right? And so that's the kind of the lens that I look at it through, rather than just kind of like it kind of dictates, rather than just using like quick tips and hacks and stuff like that to try and like game the system and everything, but and instead really thinking about it from a longer term vision, a longer term perspective. Is this is something that I'm building throughout my lifetime, right? Over my entire life. That's going to make it more meaningful. So I would say that's the first thing. And then the second thing that I think probably differentiates me from some other people is I'm very heavily focused on systems. So in addition to wanting it to be meaningful, I'm also very cognizant of how much of my time it's taking. And like
Sure.
I don't want to, like, when I say that you need to be a content creator, what I don't mean by that is that your entire life is consumed with social media. That to me is like, that's the opposite side of the problem. And so there are people out there who are, yes, like my job is to be an influencer. My job is to be a content creator. To me, I'm like, that's not what it is. That's not what my job is. Like the social media, the content, the marketing, like that is the tools, the vehicle for getting my message out there, for building my audience of people who relate to me, who know who I am, who agree with me on things, who are similar to me. And that's an audience that I'm just going to build over time of people as I connect with more people. It's social networking, by the way, right? And so if that's the goal, is to create that, not to have my life overrun with having to create content. Like I want to be able to go on vacation and not have to think about making videos about it, right? I like to just have time with my family, have time with my kids. I don't want my life to be overrun by it. And so systems are a really important part to me, and how I create content. And certainly what we help our clients with is figuring out like what systems can you create so that you can create meaningful, authentic content that is real, and it's you, and it's based in your purpose and your mission, and it's effective, it works, it does go viral, it does get the views, it is structured in a way that's engaging and it's interesting to people, but that also doesn't take up all your time. It is also systematized at least somewhat, so that it is something that is scalable, that you can grow, and you can take, a one-man team or maybe like a small skeleton team and still produce content that exists, in multiple ways across all different platforms.
That's awesome. I love how you talk about systematizing all of that. And it really hits home with the idea of like return on investment, right? Because people can sit down and they can spend 20 hours creating a 60-second short, or they could do the same thing doing a long form video. But depending on who you are and the content you create, it has different results. So, what is kind of the sweet spot that you've found with the people that you've worked with for creating the best content for them and where they're at, but not putting them in a position where they can't go on vacation without having to make videos and things of that nature?
Yeah, there's like a few rules and boundaries that I set around my content, and I think this can be different for different people. But ultimately, like it starts with really understanding what you are trying to create content about, like on a deeper level. Okay, so I think a lot of people start out like, finding one thing that works, and you kind of focus in on that thing, and then it blows up and it works really well. Like that's certainly what happened for me. Um, and that starts working, but then at some point you start thinking, okay, well, like what message do I really want to share? What do I really care about? What am I trying to build here? And so when you start operating from that perspective, then that helps it to be meaningful, and it helps it to be, more effective for your brand. But then on top of that, then now it's building those systems to be able to do it. So as far as the boundaries that I set for myself, like one of the things that really like does not appeal to me is like when I'm going on a trip with my family, with my kids, and we're about to go somewhere, like there have been times where I'm like, now I'm thinking about, okay, we're going to be in this location. I got like, what videos can I create? Like, there's an opportunity to create content. I need to do this here. And I hate that. I'm just no, I'm on vacation right now. Right. I don't want to be thinking about this. And so the boundary for me is that like, I have to, whatever content I'm going to create, the type of content I'm going to create has to be able to be separated from my life. And it has to be systematizable. It has to be batchable, right? And it's not to say that every piece of content that I create is always batched. Sometimes I sit down and I go, oh, here's an idea that I had, and I'm in flow and I'm creative and I do it. In fact, sometimes that might happen while I'm on vacation. Like, I have this idea. Let's just go make a video real quick, right? If I'm feeling creative, like, let's go. But I'm not going into the vacation with the intention of it now being a work trip, right? And that's what I care about. Um, so I'll be careful about that. And so I do a lot of like talking head style content where I'm teaching principles and ideas, and I do like sharing interesting ideas with people and sharing my ideas, my opinions, my beliefs, my thought leadership, if you will, on things, or the way that I'm thinking about things and how it's unique from maybe how other people think about it. I do enjoy sharing that kind of stuff, and I like to do it ideally as much as possible in a batchable way. And so I'll sit down and, in a day we'll shoot 5 videos, or well, I mean, in a couple hours we'll shoot 5 videos or 10 videos or 15 or 20 videos or whatever, and then drip those out over time. And that, for me, and I think for a lot of entrepreneurs who are busy, who have a lot going on, who have other priorities and things they need to be doing. We find that works really well for our clients, is to develop a routine for when you sit down to create content, to do it in a way that's very powerful and meaningful and it works, but also is, batch where you're shooting 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 videos at the same time, so that it's not something that you're having to be on and doing all the time. It's kind of a once a month or twice a month ordeal.
Gotcha. Well, I'd like to talk about things being systematized. Most people who are creative, in my experience, aren't very systematized though. I think for a lot of people it's hard. It's just you see a lot of the squirrel mentality, watch a lot of people's social media or you talk to them. I guess for you, I mean, being younger, it's like you really enjoy the creative process and doing videos and kind of was naturally for you. What do you look at like for the standpoint of creative, but you also have the entrepreneur standpoint? How are you looking at from a creativity? Is this one of the things I noticed a lot of people are curious and they're just, so they're talking about things they're curious about. So, what kind of things are, I guess, pushing your buttons or helping you drive your business or helping you kind of put your thoughts and ideas out there?
Yeah, it's interesting what you brought up, because you're right. Like, the typical creative type is not very like systematized, not routine type. And I'm very much like that. Like I said, like I'm very much a hybrid between the two. And so I do have that part of me that's just like no routine, no whatever, just kind of go with the flow, whatever. And and so for somebody like that, the systems are really advantageous, because it's like, hey, if you want to make this work, okay, there's the side of it's like, I want to create art, and then there's the side of it that I want to grow my business, I want to make this work, right? And so the systems are like, okay, if you're the artist type, if you're the creative type, and you just, you have a hard time with those routines and stuff, like that's why you need it. You need a little bit of systems, you need a little bit of routine in order to get you to do it consistently and to do it in the right way and structure the videos the right way, so that they'll actually be effective for your business. Otherwise you'll end up just spinning your wheels, creating content that is, yeah, maybe it feels good to create, and maybe it feels like it's your art and it's your creativity, but there's a reason there's a stigma of the starving artist, right? And it's because the starving artist does not learn the skills of entrepreneurship, right? And so it's advantageous to people like that. For somebody who's more entrepreneurial, okay, let's talk about someone who's like, and when I say entrepreneurial, what I mean is like somebody who's systems and business and like all numbers and like no creativity or anything like that. And I know that's not, everybody has a mix, right? But we're talking in streams here just to illustrate a point. When you're talking about somebody like that, the systems become really valuable, because I do believe that you can systematize creativity. And that's a really valuable thing for somebody who's not naturally creative. Okay. For people who are creative, we're like, yeah, the videos and the editing and everything, that all comes easy to me because I just know how to do that. They're like, that's easy. But for somebody who's just, very right, what would it be? Left brained, very left brained, and it's just like all numbers in business, like it's like how can I be more creative? And when I say creative, a lot of times the word creative or creativity gets ascribed to like artists, painters, photographers, videographers, that kind of thing. When I say creative in the term of on in terms of entrepreneurship, we're talking about innovation, right? And it is also a necessary skill to be successful as an entrepreneur. The biggest businesses in the world are very creative, or they're very innovative. Okay, which is a better word for it. And so the goal is to be innovative. And if you can manufacture, if you can systematize innovation, if you can systematize creativity, and that's what I find myself doing a lot with like entrepreneurial types, is like, okay, let me just systematize this for you, how to create high quality content. Where this is not your forte, that's fine. We'll help you to make that happen. Like, follow these processes in this step, or here's an SOP for your team or your structure and everything. And that kind of stuff makes it so they're able to, like, yes, they can understand that. I can follow that system. And then by doing that, the output of it eventually becomes creativity, right? And it becomes content, it becomes art. On the flip side, for the artists, it's more like, hey, let's kind of rein in your skills and get you on a system so that you can do this consistently so that it can be effective. So it just kind of goes both ways.
I love that.
Nice. So I'm curious, we talked a lot about the overall strategy of all of this, but can you give us an example of one of the like in-depth tactics of what those systems actually look like for someone and how they implement it?
Yeah, for sure. So, man, with every client that we work with, we typically start out by, first figuring out their personal strategy, their goal, their purpose. Like, what are we trying to accomplish with this? What are we trying to do? Where are we trying to go with this? And then how does that apply to your entire life, really? Like we try to find the relationship of your personal brand to your business. A lot of entrepreneurs are very tied in identity to the business that they're in right now. And we try to help people get out of that and really think of like your personal brand transcends the business that you're in right now. And statistically speaking, whatever business you're in right now, you won't be in 10 years from now, because entrepreneurial, that's just what happens. Is we pivot and we go different directions, we try different things, and your brand can kind of be the thread that connects all of those things. And so typically that's the first thing that we try to figure out. And then that feeds into like, okay, well, what platforms are you going to post on, for example? So let's build a system around that. Like, okay, I'm just choosing like this one and this. I'm doing Instagram and Twitter, and that's it, right? Or I'm going to do all of these or whatever. And so getting clear on that. And then what formats on those platforms, what formats are you going to create? So we'll come up with 4 or 5 different formats for them to use by researching competitors, if you will, or other people in their industry who are going viral or whose content is working. What formats are working in that industry? Let's figure out those formats. We systematize things like content pillars. Okay, so what are the topics that you're going to talk about? And these, again, are not just your business or what you do for work. That's usually one of them. But then on top of that, what other things are there? Like I talk about creativity and art and business and family and entrepreneurship and personal development and all these things. So those are my content pillars. So we systematize that. And then I think about everything in frameworks and systems. Then we go down from that level now to, okay, the specific videos that you're creating, how do we script them? What is the system for scripting them? And let's follow that exact same script. So I have a framework that I use for that. In fact, I just launched a course that teaches that entire thing in depth. And so then that's like the 4-step framework that I use in almost every single piece of content that makes it work. It makes it go viral, makes it get attention, makes people want to watch it, makes people take action with it. So there's that. Then the systems for how we then repurpose content. So we call this the content waterfall. So now once you create one piece of content, how do you take that idea and turn it into like 5 or 6 or maybe even 10 or 15 different formats, right? Because I can write a newsletter, for example, and that newsletter could be turned into like 20 pieces of content and in different formats, videos and podcasts and interviews and carousels and images and long form copy and tweet threads. And those are all different formats, right? And then within the formats, you even have sub formats, which then it gets a little bit crazy because now within short form video, you have the talking head videos, you have green screen videos, you have B-roll with text over top of them, you have all the different types of formats that you can create. So how can I take one piece of content and turn it into many different pieces, many different formats? And then from there, you take one format. So a format maybe like a talking head short form video. Now it's like, what platforms can that format can be copy and pasted to? Can it be repurposed to? So if I create a talking head short form, that can go on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube Shorts without having to change anything basically on it. But if I were to take that thing and put it on Twitter, maybe need to tweak some things about the caption or the description and things like that. So now we're figuring out like where can I copy and paste, and then where do I just need to tweak a little bit so that I can move it across platforms. So you can see how one idea then turns into many different pieces of content. And that's kind of like the ultimate system. And that's not typically where I recommend people start. But you get to that point eventually where you're like, now I want to be omnipresent. I want to be in all places. And you're building that up and making that happen. So I know we're talking kind of surface level here, and we can go deeper into any of these if you want to. But the point I'm trying to get across is that there are lots of systems to how to do this, and kind of walking through like, okay, here's all the different systems that are in place that take somebody who's an entrepreneur, for example, and helps them to A, find their purpose, B, figure out how to talk about it, and then C, create the content and start making it happen and then grow their business from it.
I love that. So, I think we're linear, like you're talking about operations over here and just kind of, systems, that kind of thing. And I do real estate. So it's always like, what's the dollars and cents? What's the return on the investment? And then I see you have that kind of both worlds you're in, kind of two things. But how do you help people that journey? Obviously, talk about content, but like you being younger, because most people are one or the other, I find. They're just not a morph. So being younger in content creation, what kind of got you the entrepreneur? Like, what made you think that? Like, do you have a family out of business, small business, or what got you kind of in the entrepreneur world and kind of got you to the Two Comma Club Award? I'm just really interested to hear your story from a business standpoint, how you got from zero to where you're at now.
Yeah, like I said, I was always entrepreneurial from a young age. Just always had that bug, either have it or you don't. Some people do, some people don't.
Yeah,
And just it just for me it was like I could have told you from when I was very young that I was probably never going to have a job. Like it just I started my first business when I was 13 years old. I was selling t-shirt designs to screamo bands on MySpace. And got started doing that. I learned very young that I could make products and sell them online, and people could pay me with like PayPal and stuff. And so I think I just always saw the opportunity. And so, anytime there was an opportunity to like go interview for a job or whatever, like I had this resistance to it always. It was just this conflict personally for me. And it just didn't make sense. And so, I went through lots of different iterations of businesses and ideas and all creative and graphic design. And I was developing iPhone apps, and then I was building websites, and then I was branding companies and doing logos and design. I went to school for graphic design. I started a recording studio, started producing music and making YouTube videos. Then I got really into the video side of things, and I started producing commercials for like luxury hotel brands. And all this stuff happened. And then it was 2016 was when I first got introduced to like the online like info world, if you will. And I was introduced to the idea of producing an online course or coaching online or doing that kind of thing. And so, and I got introduced to the ClickFunnels world, and started going to FHL and seeing like what other people were doing in this space, and was really intrigued by it because as much as I loved like all the creative things that I was doing or the freelance work, like this seemed like it was more scalable. Okay. And so while all the creative things I was doing were like really serving my creative heart, if you will, they weren't as much serving my entrepreneurial brain, because I knew that I was looking for something that like building a recording studio locally like just wasn't going to scale the way I wanted it to, ever probably. And a lot of things that I was doing, even though I enjoyed doing them. And so it was a matter of figuring out like, okay, how to create something that now is more scalable. And so I created an online course and coaching, community for filmmakers called Cinema Mastery. And it was at the time when I started it, I was running a production company. I had just hit six figures a year in my production company, shooting videos and commercials for clients. And that was a big deal for me back then. Like having hit six figures in a year, I was like, this is amazing. And I knew there were a lot of filmmakers out there that could benefit from learning how I did that and how I shot the videos I did and how I got clients and everything like that. And that's what I started talking about. I started just kind of sharing that and talking about it, and people started buying it, and we built a community, over the 6 or 7 years that we were doing it, to over 15,000 customers, buyers in 100 countries around the world.
Wow.
And 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 yeah, so it was amazing. Like built up this whole community, and that was awesome. And so as far as like getting to the Two Comma Club Award, um, it was actually one product that changed everything for me. And they say like it's one funnel, one traffic source, one offer until you hit $1 million. But I think a lot of times we spend like a few years figuring out what that one funnel is going to be.
Yeah.
And I certainly did. So 3 years into that, of like running this thing and doing webinars and some high ticket stuff and some low ticket stuff and like messing around with everything, 3 years into that, I think I had made about $500,000 in 3 years, right? So in the first year, this new business made as much as my production company was making. And so I was like, well, this is cool. Yeah, this is happening. So I kind of went all in on it. By the end of 3 years, we'd hit about 500,000, and that was really cool. And then there was a point where we decided to go all in on the one funnel, right? That one product. And we had an idea for a product, and I had heard this from Russell Brunson and from some other mentors, other people, this idea of like focusing. And I was like, we've been doing all this different stuff. Like, what if I just focused? And so I took this product. It was a course called Lighting Secrets, and it was $47, just a mini course on lighting, everything you need to know about lighting to make your videos look nice. And this was very focused on filmmakers and like high-end commercial filmmakers and that kind of thing. And so I created this course, I started selling it. And at first it didn't actually work. You know, we started running ads to it. We were losing money on it. I remember like losing like $10,000 a month on ads to this course. And yeah, the funny thing is, like, when you end the month with less money than you started the month, like, you really start to question your life as an
Yeah.
entrepreneur, and like, why am I even doing this? What is the point? But that was happening, for a few months, and just trying to figure it out, like, what is going on? But I remember I was like, I decided I was going to focus. I'm going to do this. Like, I'm focused on this one thing. And so rather than just like jumping to another thing, which is what I probably would have done in the past, and what I think a lot of entrepreneurs do, like, this thing isn't working, I'm going to go try something else. I decided, you know what? How can I make this work? How can I make it work? Because people were buying it. It's not like nobody was buying it. There were people interested, but something needed help. And so I started just tweaking and testing and split testing and just going all in on it, changing the littlest things, like changing a few words in the headline that made like a 17% increase in conversions. I was like, okay, that's interesting. Came up with this new video ad that like doubled our conversions. I was like, okay, that's interesting. Like, started coming up with this stuff. And then I did these split tests where I would like, I was like, I think people are really interested in how low the price is on this. So I'm going to put the price a little bit higher on the page. And I did that, and then like ran it for a few days and came back and found out that it worked worse. And so like I lost a bunch of money on that. And so there were so many of these tests and tweaks and split testing and trying things out to see what was going to work. And some of them worked better and some of them didn't. And when they didn't work better, I go, okay, revert back to the control, right? And then try something else. And we would do that. I talked to one of my mentors once, and I was like, hey, will you just give me, like, look at my page and just give me a laundry list of ideas of things that I could test? And he did. He got on and he looked at it. He was like, you could try this, try this, try this, try this, try changing the color of this, try changing this, whatever. And I went through and I did every single one of them, just one at a time, running split tests until we had, like 100 sales each, ideally on each variation of it, so that we could get significant data. And then we would make a decision. Okay, this one worked better. Boom, take it. Let's try something else. See which one works better. This one worked better. Okay, boom, try the next one. And I did that over and over and over again. And I went from month one making like literally nothing, like losing $10,000 a month, to month two making about $15,000. Month three made $30,000. Month four made $50,000, and month five had my first six-figure month ever. Made over $100,000 in 1 month, all from that process.
That's amazing.
And within 6 months, so like I said, it took us 3 years to hit $500,000. Within 6 months from that point, we crossed the 2 Comma Club awards. We did the other half in just 6 months. Crazy acceleration.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love how it all came down to split testing, because I feel like that's one of the most under talked about things out there right now. And it sounds like that was a complete and total game changer for you and where you were at in your process. And so what advice would you have to those who are at that month one where they've decided to commit to something, go all in on it, and now they're losing money every month, but they should be, going out and split testing on a regular basis? Like, how did you keep that mental fortitude to persevere in those moments?
Well, I'll tell you, it's not easy. It really was hard. Like, if I go back, it's hard to remember, but if I go back, I can remember moments where it was like, it was a struggle. Like, real, like, I was down. I didn't know if this was going to work or if we were going to be able to make it. Or I mean, we all as entrepreneurs go through stuff like that, and there were some hard times in there for sure. But when it comes down to it, like, if I look at my entire past as an entrepreneur, the moments of the highest peaks or the biggest moments of growth have all come from honing in on one thing, from focusing. And it makes sense if you think about it. Like, if your attention is split between 10 different things, you're going to do 10 things mediocre versus doing one thing very well. And so logically it makes sense. For whatever reason, we don't often operate that way, because a lot of entrepreneurs, and I fall into this trap too. We often think that like the key to making more money is by launching new things. It's like you launch one product and you sell as many as you can, and then you're like, okay, well now I need to go launch something else, and I need to go create something else, and then cut something else, and you end up with an entire value ladder of products that are all kind of working, right? And that's honestly what keeps you stuck. Um, there is a time and a place to diversify, and there's a time to grow and to build that thing and to start making that happen, but it's definitely not at the beginning, and it takes a little bit of time to get there. And so, I think that the advice to focus until you've made $1 million on one thing is actually really sound advice. I think there's some experimentation at the beginning to figure out what is that one thing that I really want to scale. I want to try to make happen. But then ultimately it is sound advice, because it's when you give all of your effort and all of your energy into it that you can do that. You can split test and create new ad creatives and try new things out. Like there's no way I would have had the energy to do that if I was focusing on all these other things to make it happen. And so, yes, ultimately, I think that is the goal. If you do want to scale something, you do want to grow, like it really is ultimately comes down to the one thing that takes off. And it's figuring out what that one thing is and then just committing to it for a long period of time. I've seen that, not just in the business realm, but also, the same thing happened recently a few years ago when I committed to making content. For the entire time I was running the cinema mastery business, my business was entirely built on ads, and ads are great and they're good for scaling, but they're also very expensive. And it got to a point where the ads got too expensive for me, and it was during a holiday season, and it kind of blew up, and everything imploded, and I lost our entire business, and things weren't going well. That I really finally had the reality check that I needed to really commit to making content. And so I turned off all of my ads, and I actually started making videos every single day, creating content, talking about what I was doing. It's not something that I had done before, even though I knew how to do it. I'd been doing it since I was a little kid. It was intuitive for me, but for whatever reason, we're good at helping other people with things, but then we can't do them for ourselves for some reason. So,
The real block.
yeah, it really is. It really is. So I committed again, once again, committed. I said, this is it. This is, and it always seems to stem from those times when you're just down and you don't know what to do, and you're just like, I've got to do this, and this is the thing that I need to do, and so I'm going to take this one thing and I'm going to commit to it, and I'm just going to go for it. And I did. And again, for the first 2 months I was losing followers every day. It wasn't going well. It wasn't really getting views or anything like that. But then I kept going, and I started tweaking the content, and I started paying attention to oh, this one worked really well, this one didn't. I need to do more of this and less of this, which is akin to the split test, right? Where it's take the one that worked and use it, take the one that didn't work, get rid of it. And I started doing that with my content. And what do you know, within 5 or 6 months, my following grew to over 100,000 followers. I was reaching 500 to 600,000 people per day. Sorry, per month. let's be right here. Per month, getting 1,000 followers a day. It just started taking off really fast, and I had this huge increase that created a foundation, a platform for everything that I'm doing now. And so, we've continued to grow that, and we've continued to build it. And but it all came from that focus on that content now. And so now in over 2 years, almost coming up on 3 years, I haven't spent a single dime on ads. We are getting into it again here soon, because now we've finally hit a point where we're ready to scale a little bit faster. But we're building from a foundation that's really powerful, and we've been able to build our entire business to even higher heights completely from organic content, and not just from spending money on ads. But yeah, in that time frame, we haven't spent any money on ads and be able to grow completely organically, which has been just a huge shift for us. And that's a kind of ushered me into this new realm of business, and where I'm really focused on, I love filmmaking and I love video. You can tell my background's complete overkill, and it's I obsess about this stuff. But that was only a piece of me. It was only a part of me. And when I started creating content, it started taking off, and I was talking about filmmaking, and then but I started to realize that even though it was taking off, like I wasn't really sharing all the things that I like to share, or that I had, you know, skills and talents in, or passions about, that I could share with people, that I could help people with. And so it was that point when I really started to understand the power of a personal brand, where it's not just me talking about one thing, but it's actually me talking about all of these things that I can help people with and that I care about, and really building it around me and what I care about, what my mission is, what my purpose is. And that was when everything really started taking off, is building from there. And so now that's how we've come full circle to what we do now. And we help people with that, build their brand, create their business, grow it, scale it, and everything online because of that.
I love that. I love it. A couple of things I saw there's always resistance. You know what I mean? There's going to be resistance. But the other thing I saw a lot of entrepreneurs is the definitive thing is mindset. But it's really get to the point where it's not working and like the negativity can come in, all those things would creep in. Why am I doing this? You mentioned that earlier. Like for you, like how are you coaching folks? Because everybody's going to hit that. If you see, like you said, $10,000 a month, a lot. So $15,000 a month, a lot of money to lose, and still believe you're doing the right thing. Obviously you can use your experience, but how are you coaching folks to kind of get past that, knowing what's on the other side of that resistance?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I do think that everything is nuanced, right? And it's not so black and white. And I like to think very critically. I like to think very nuanced in things. And a lot of times, in these short podcasts, we talk about like, it's just do this, this, and this. And but then there's always more to it, right? And I think in this case, the more to it is that there is a point where you have to be aware that like maybe the thing that you're doing like just isn't cutting it, like it isn't going to work, right? And so I think that takes a level of awareness of going like, is this actually a good thing that I care about, that I'm interested in? Is it actually something that people want? Is it actually something that is working in today's market? Or is it just completely like so out in left field that like maybe it's not the best idea to continue pursuing it, based on the goal that I have, or like the number that I want to hit, or where I'm trying to go. And so I think you do have to be aware of that. But I would say that most people, the fatal mistake is not being aware of that. I think that the more fatal mistake for more people is thinking that way too soon. And that's what I would say is when you're I mean, I see this with business and with content. When somebody comes to me and they're like, I've been making videos and it's not working. They're not really taking off. I'm not getting views or comments and stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, well, let me pull up your account. And I open up their account and I'm like, well, how many videos have you made? And they're like, well, I'm going to post my 5th one today. And I'm like, well, come on. like I just it's like I don't really have any advice to give you, because I don't even have enough data to be able to tell you why anything's working or not working. Like you just haven't done enough of it. Come back to me when you're 90 days in of daily content, and then let's make an adjustment, then let's tweak. And that's really the important thing. It's the same thing with business, is like, if I had focused on that funnel for 2 months and then said, well, this isn't working, then it never would have worked, right? But it was like month 3 that it started working. And so you have to have that persistence, and you kind of have to be a little bit what's the word for it,
Resilient.
determined,
Yeah.
stubborn.
Yeah.
Yeah, stubborn a little bit, and be able to go like, no, I committed to this thing, I'm going to do it. And then, really give it your all, because sometimes I think we dip our toes into things to see if they will work. But the nature of the fact is that by only dipping your toes into it, you are guaranteeing that it will not work.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's the all in attention that makes it work.
Mm-hmm. That sounds a lot like Tony Robbins' concept of like burning the boats. It's like if you want to take the island, you have to
Yeah.
burn the boats. And what you find in that is, just like he says, a lot of times when your back is up against the wall and you're cornered, like when people have no choice other than to succeed, they tend to succeed. And it sounds like in that moment with your ads and everything, with your funnel and split testing, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Are there any other moments in your life as an entrepreneur and just an individual where a similar path has happened, where you've only really persevered through, I guess, like faith and determination?
I mean, I feel like that happens like every other week for me, but In some ways, it feels like that as an entrepreneur. I mean, those are two big, like, very more recent ones, but certainly that has happened like over and over and over again. And I think the biggest question for people is really discovering, like, for me, I've seen that as a trend, and it feels like it's always that way. It's like these peaks and valleys that you go through, but then, like, and you can have a tendency to believe that there's something wrong with you when that's happening. It's like, why do I keep hitting a ceiling? Now, granted, if you're hitting a ceiling at the same level every single time, there probably is something wrong with you. There probably is something that needs to get figured out, right? There's a that's where the mindset game comes in. That's where the mental game comes in. That's when it's figuring out that it's like, what is the mental block that's holding me back? There's probably something big there. And I've worked through many of those, worked with coaches and mindset coaches and therapists and facilitators and all sorts of people to break down those, beliefs that I maybe learned growing up as a child that are fine, but like they're not serving me in what I'm trying to do or in my goals. Right. And so when you learn how to break those things down, like, then that helps you kind of break through that. But the idea of the peaks and the valleys is normal. That always happens. And you're going to hit peaks and you're going to hit valleys. But like, as long as the peaks keep getting bigger, then you're in momentum. Okay. And so you want the peaks to continue to get bigger. But don't ever expect that like the valleys are going to disappear. Even huge, the biggest companies in the world go through this. They have media issues or something happens or whatever, and then they go through this huge valley and then they come back stronger later. And that's just a part of business. Like, business entrepreneurship is just continually solving problems, and it doesn't end. Like, there's no real coasting in this. And so I would say that, like, with the peaks and valleys, but I do believe that there is a certain amount of, when you've been through enough peaks and valleys and you start to recognize the pattern, the trend, and you start to recognize the things that are consistently causing the peak and the things that are consistently causing the valley. So for me, for example, like we've talked about, one of the things that I noticed keeps on consistently causing peaks is focusing on one thing. So it's like, okay, now I have that in my memory bank. The only way I could ever really truly know that is by going through lots of peaks and valleys. People could tell you that. In fact, there's people listening to this podcast, I'm telling it to you right now, but you won't ever really learn it until you experience it. That, like, that is a thing that causes peaks. And so you, when you start to learn those things and get that's the thing, like, oh, that's what I need to do. And you start to notice, what are the things that cause valleys, right? Maybe it's me letting off the gas, or maybe it was me, self-sabotaging, or maybe it was, me pivoting or changing directions, or what are the things that are causing those valleys? And we start to see those, you go, okay, it's kind of like the theme of this whole podcast. You pay attention to the things that are working, and you do more of those things, and you pay attention to the things that are not working, and you do less of those things. And what you'll find is that you can kind of smooth it out, right? Where it's not like dramatic high and extremely low, like crazy depression. And then, like, we're rich and we're going to be amazing and successful. And then, like, we're dying. And it's just like, it starts out that way. But then when you learn, oh, I need to do more of this and less of this, now you're looking at, things like this, where it's just little valleys, and then you continue with that momentum because you know what to do when you end up in one of those valleys.
I like that. You talk a lot about mental mindset. I like that a lot. One of the things that really cued in, and you said it worked for you when the peak started taking off, was when you said that things weren't working. The lighting business. When you first started that offer, I mean, that's very niche, first off. So you pick something specific. I think that's really important because people are all over the map. I know we are. I'm all over the map. I do real estate. I'm all over the map. But what really worked for me is when I got real specific, but then it wasn't working at first. But when you asked the question, I think is critical. Is how do we make this work? And I think something switches on in the mind because you pick something, you're committed to it. Now, how do I make it work versus pivoting and changing gears? I see so many people do that. I know you're talking to clients all the time, and they're like, "Hey, it's not working, Eric. It's not working. I want to do something else." You're like, "Well, you've been in it for 2 months. Let's just focus." And so, how are you kind of getting people or selling them on themselves, really, to get them to believe that what they chose is going to work?
Yeah, I think the question you have to ask yourself is, like, have you really exhausted all your resources to make this work?
Yeah.
And I think too often we give up before we have. And that's why you get people that go, oh, YouTube doesn't work, or short form video doesn't work. Webinars don't work. Okay. Challenges don't work. The 2 Comma Club isn't real. it's like, it's those things, like, they all work. Every strategy out there works. It works. It's a strategy because it worked for someone. And the reality is that it's not that the strategy doesn't work. It's that you don't do the work is the problem. And and this is the problem with a lot of entrepreneurs, is that we jump from thing to thing to thing to thing. You dip your toes into one thing, and it's like, that one doesn't work. So dip your toes into another thing. But like, you never actually, if you never commit to one thing, like really go fully all in on it and say, like, I'm doing this for the next year. That's what I did with content. I determined, I said, I'm making a video every day for a year. And that's what I did. And then boom, look what happened. It took off. Now I'm like looking for, like, what's the next thing that I can do every day for a year that'll make things take off, right? So it's that commitment. That's really the name of the game. Like, that's what makes it work.
100%.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree anymore. So with that said, what tactics and strategies do you have for helping people kind of figure out what it is that they want to commit to? Because I know that there's a million different opportunities that they have to do this for, both professionally and personally. Like, they can go in on a random personal brand about, like me, for example, rock climbing versus like doing financial education or something like that. You know, it's like, how do you help people determine those different paths?
I take people through an exercise of really figuring out what I call their design. Okay. And to put this briefly so that we don't run over time here, your design is made up of 4 things. It's your strengths, your passions, your values, and your energy. And that to me is like, and the reason why I do this is because I think there's a certain level of, if you really want to create something that is going to work, is going to work long term, and is going to be meaningful long term, and it's not something that you're just going to want to pivot away from immediately, you have to really build from your design. Now this is different from the mentality of, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, I'm very business focused, and I'm just going to choose a target market, find a pain point, create a solution for that pain point, and I'm going to go and arbitrage that and make money. Okay. That's fine too. That's a very much an entrepreneurial approach to things. For somebody like me, or anybody who's listening, who's like, maybe like, yeah, I'm an entrepreneur too, but I also have this kind of like creative heart, and I care about, doing things that I care about, and I want to do something that I'm passionate about, then that's where your design comes in. And I do think that even if you are entrepreneurial and want to do things like that, like I have side projects that I do that are like that as well. Like, this is just a money-making venture, right? But when it comes to my personal brand and my content and my courses and coaching, like, it's very much built around my design. And your design is your passion, strengths, your values, and your energy. Your passions, the things that you like to do. Okay. Your strengths, the things that you are naturally good at. Your values, the things you care about. And then your energy is how your body works, how your energy works, because that's different for everybody. And everybody has this unique DNA of these 4 things that nobody else can compete with. It's the way that you are. And essentially the idea here is that when it comes to really like devoting your life's work to something, the more that you can be in alignment with your natural design, the more effective, the more efficient, the more successful you're always going to be. Now, you don't have to choose to do that. You have the agency to choose to do whatever you want. You could do something that is out of alignment with who you are, but you're always going to be in conflict, okay? Because your natural rhythm is going one direction and you're trying to take it another direction. And so as long as you can, it's always advantageous to understand what that design is and to be able to lean into it and to accept it. And this to me is very like, this gets into like, I'll be honest, a little bit more like woo-woo stuff, right? But I really believe in this, and I really think it's important because it gets more into nature instead of nurture. There's nurture, like who you've become, and then there's nature is who you are. And there are certain things that are encoded into us to be the way that we are, to have a certain personality, to have a certain energy, to have certain interests and passions. Some of that may have come from like growing up or how we were nurtured as well, but you can't change the fact that that's just the way that you are. well, I'm not going to say you can't change that. You can change it, but these are the types of things that change very slowly over time. It's not like overnight. Oh, I got this new hobby that I'm interested in. We're talking about like your personality doesn't just change like that. It maybe will over time with repeated exposure to certain situations. And so the more you can just accept that, oh, this is the way that I am. This is the way that the ship is already moving. This is the way that the river is already flowing. I'm just going to drop myself into that river and go with it, go with the flow, rather than trying to compete against it, puts you in a place where now you have the opportunity to be the most efficient, most productive, most successful version of yourself. And so that's where I typically start people out with is like, let's just discover that just so that you can be aware of it, if nothing else. And when you build your business, from personal experience around those things, it's more fun. It's more exciting. It grows faster. It's less stressful. It'll make you happier. You'll be more fulfilled. All of these benefits come from it because you're in alignment. You're in flow. You're doing things the way you like to do them. And so my business, my brand, my coaching, everything that I'm doing, within this realm, my book and all that kind of stuff is very much built around the things that I'm interested in, that I like. It's very much built around the things that I'm naturally good at. Like talking about this stuff is not hard for me. Like I could probably spend another 10 hours doing this, right? This is just natural. It just comes with the territory for me. Things that you are that you care about that are interesting to you, like this is very much tied to a mission for me, and things that I think are important in terms of being an entrepreneur and being a creator and putting your message out there and sharing it with people and doing positive things in the world and building things. I think that's very important for people to do. And then my energy, getting clear on like, oh, you know what, like I won't do certain things in my business because I know I just don't operate that way. Or there are certain things like I'll only take this many calls every day, or I have this much personal space set aside every day because I know how I work. Other people are going to be different. It's totally fine. They can do it their way. But I know how I operate, and I set up my business and the structure and the calendar and the to-do list and everything around that energy. So when you're clear on those things, it allows you to be in alignment and allows things to go just so much smoother.
I love that. I like you're kind of in both worlds, and I see from the start of our conversation. And you're always building something, whether you're a creator building content and videos. You're building something, your brand, or if you're in business, you're building a business. You're creating things. You really are. We are just builders by nature. If you're an entrepreneur in that spirit, and I love that. I think a ton of people would resonate with you. But I like how you can keep both the creative side, but also entrepreneurs and bridge the two. I think a lot of people don't have that. I'm more of an entrepreneur mindset, but John's more of a creative, so we kind of bounce off each other. But I love what you're doing. I think there's a ton of people that could value from how you're putting things together. When I read your book, I'm like, oh, it just makes sense. It's more of a flow, like you said, than trying to go out and put your head against the wall. I'm going to build a business and make videos and put out there in the world. And then, like you said, it's not authentic. And people see it, they're like, oh, he's just trying to sell us, versus just capturing what you're doing and what you're talking about. I love that. So I guess in my mind, for our listeners, we wrap up. How can our listeners really connect with you, learn more from you, pick up some coaching or whatever they can do to get help in what they're building? How can folks connect with you and learn more about you?
Yeah, so you can find me at on any social media platform at Eric Thayne. Eric with a C, Thayne is my last name, and yeah, I would love to have you follow there. That's where I share most of my stuff. A lot of free tips and advice and tricks on how to create content, how to grow your business, all that kind of stuff. I do have a free community as well on School, so yeah, you'll be able to find that if you go to any of the social media profiles and start following links, like you'll find your way there. But it's called Create, and inside of the Create community, we talk about all of this stuff, and I share kind of like behind the scenes looks at what I'm doing and what's going on there. So definitely check that out, and be happy to have you follow there, and would love to connect more with more people.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Eric. This was very insightful and really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you guys. Yeah, this has been awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.